Welcome to another episode of Ministry Matters That Matter. I am excited to have our new Director of Church Relations at Heritage Christian University, Barry Benion, and we've known each other for several years. He has some
Yes,
roots
sir.
in Florence, and I'm excited about us sharing together and what we can, as a part of this community, learn from you and what experiences God has given you. So thank you for joining us on the show, first of all.
Yes, sir.
All right, so kind of tell them about your family and tell us your ministry story, kind of where God has been using you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of the Heritage group and the Heritage team. So I appreciate that. And yeah, it has been several years that I've known you and all that you've done for the church and for the kingdom, and we appreciate that.
Thanks.
So I grew up in Noonan, Georgia, and we had some people start the Lads of Leaders program, which I credit to helping me kind of get out of my shell,
Hmm.
um, and get used to being in front of people. And so we would do the speeches and song leading, do the services and that kind of stuff. And we had some valuable, you had mentioned it the other night about parents and youth ministers. We didn't have a youth minister where I was at in Noonan, Georgia, but we had some adult couples that
Hmm.
poured into us. That meant so much to me that when I stepped foot on the campus of Freed Hardeman, I was like, well, this is where I want to go. And I'd already decided as a high schooler that I wanted to be in ministry and or that I wanted to help with the youth group.
Hmm.
And so I was like, well, I'm gonna go to school here. I might as well get paid for it. And because I knew I wanted to give back to young people what adults had poured into me.
Hmm.
I don't think there's enough adults that realize how valuable they are of just being on youth retreats and being at lock-ins and being at devotionals and helping them with the youth group, how valuable they are. And whether they have, because the ones I'm talking about, none of them had kids in youth group, but they all meant something to me. They
Hmm.
made an impact on me. And so that's really what led me to ministry, is because of the impact that those adults played on me. And I had decided I'm going to do that. Well, fortunately, I met a young lady from Corinth,
Hmm.
Mississippi, that she also wanted to do the same thing, because she had the same thing in her life and her church and her youth group. They didn't have a full-time youth minister. They had parents and other adults who were willing to pour into their young people. And so that's really how I got started in ministry.
All right, so let's kind of talk about as you relate to ministry and family and so forth. You're going through a transition.
That's right.
It's not the first transition you've had in ministry. Now it
Yes,
may
sir.
be a little different in that you were preaching at Savannah, and then now you're working with us, and you're still preaching every Sunday. It's just
Yes.
not at the same church every
That's
Sunday.
right.
Okay,
That's right.
so talk about over the years as you've transitioned works and roles. Have you found there were some things that you and the family could do that helped? Or some particular things that you like were struggles that, as we think about those of us who are a part of this conversation, we've
Hmm.
had transitions and will have
Right.
transitions. And so just share with us.
Well, one of the ones that come to mind is early on. My wife was heavily involved in our ministry because we were working with young people. We didn't have kids, and she wanted to help with the girls for the
Hmm.
same reason that a reason I wanted to go into ministry is because of those adults that poured into us, and she wanted to be part of that as well. And then our kids came along. We were able to take them to things, and that was the first transition when you started having kids in ministry, because it was kind of dual roles then. And that was a challenge, but there again, we still had parents and stuff that would help. And then I guess probably the biggest challenge transition that comes to my mind is being the youth minister when your kids are in the youth
Oh,
group.
wow. Hmm.
No, that in that transition, you're wondering, okay, I'm helping all these other kids. They have feel free to come to me to tell me stuff they might not talk to their parents about, but yet my kids are there. And so you have
Who do
that.
they talk to? Yeah.
Yeah, who do they talk to? But that still goes back to the original reason I got into ministry. So having my kids in my youth group is one thing, but my kids didn't mind it. They liked me being there. But I had other adults helping with the youth program that they could
That
get
your
to.
kids could plug into.
That's right. And so that's the key for a youth minister who have their kids are in their youth group, which is a transition, and is making sure those other adults are plugged in to help.
All right. So when you transitioned from youth ministry to doing preaching, and as a youth minister, you preach, and as a preacher, you work with young people.
That's
There's
right.
a lot of overlap, has been my experience. What was the biggest challenge in transitioning to becoming the preaching minister?
I remember those first few months, maybe even that first year when I was at Savannah, thinking, man, I'm the preacher. I've never been used to being the preacher. I'm the preacher. You know, how am I supposed to do this?
Yes.
Well, fortunately, the way my path took, and I want to say these guys' names because they meant a lot to me, and people like you and so many others that I knew in ministry. But my first two mentors in ministry were Mark Posey and Philip Hines.
Oh, it's too great.
And though I was working with young people, those guys were teaching me so much about being the preacher that I didn't even realize. And so when I became the preacher at Savannah, I relied on the stuff that I learned from those guys. You know, it was still a challenge because I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, but I also had elders who knew where I had been, knew that I'd been in youth ministry, and they gave me the opportunity to grow. Those were the differences to me that helped me through that transition where Mark Posey and Philip Hines, what they taught me, and my eldership at Savannah, they knew where I had been, and they gave me the opportunity to grow.
All right. So let's springboard off of that. Working with elders.
Okay.
Some of the folks who are a part of this conversation work in congregations where they do not have an eldership, but others do. So, do
Right.
you have any tips on relationships with elders and working and communication, etc.?
The times that I feel like I've had the best relationship with elders is when we spent more time than just in meetings together. At Savannah, uniquely, we had one elder that when he was in secular work, he would stop by the office, you know, maybe once or twice a week, come in and talk with us. And then I ended up the last 4 years, 4.5 years I was there, I lived beside one of the elders.
Okay.
And that helped. And so it was doing the things outside of just meetings that helped build that relationship with those elders. The ones where I might not have had the best relationship with, it was the ones where, you know, it was just at church or just in the meetings.
Yes.
And so, but that is to say, that was a good thing for the men at Savannah. But there was also a period I remember talking to one of them, was like, man, I need to be with y'all more. I need to meet more. We need to be around more, even talking about ministry stuff and then not talking about ministry stuff. So as much as you need to be with the church, you also need to spend time with the elders. And a lot of that I learned when I was with Mark and when I was with Philip.
Yes.
Because they did that. I saw it. I saw how it worked, and I saw the benefits of that. And so I just accredit a lot of that, learning how to work with elders, but also seeing the importance of building those relationships.
Yeah.
Outside of just meetings.
Well, you had a great eldership at Savannah. I know several of them, supermen. All right. So let's think about preaching.
Okay.
For those out there who are preaching, what are some lessons you've learned or tips on preaching?
Well, this is the phrase that comes to my mind. And if you've ever read around Dale or Jeff Jenkins, they'll say it because their dad said it. Love God, love people. And I found that even before I heard Dale saying that, I found that if you do that, that's the thing that makes the difference. We do live in, here's the challenge one of the challenges I see in preaching. We live in a time where you can pull up YouTube, or TikTok, any of these videos of some dynamic preachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so the everyday preachers are judged by those dynamic preachers. But there's a place for those everyday preachers. And I want to encourage those everyday preachers to keep on keeping on. Don't change who you are because you might be judged by the ones that's out there on social media and everything. Because that's important. So yes, you need to preach good lessons, but if you just preach good lessons and you're not with the people in good times and in difficult times, you're gonna be preaching those good lessons somewhere else.
Yeah, and nobody's
You
gonna
know,
be listening.
that's right. That's right. So you got to love the people as well.
That's powerful. All right, one last thing, just general ministry tips as you think about your experience with churches. General tips for those of us serving in ministry in the church.
So this is the first thing that comes to my mind because this is where I'm at in my transition. From full-time located ministry to now doing what we do, I'm having to transition how I stretch myself to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is reminding me of is no matter what position we are in ministry, whether it's youth ministry, associate ministry, pulpit ministry, or ministry at Heritage Christian University, because we are a ministry
Yes,
and
very
we
much so.
are working to aid ministry and churches. It's important. We preach it to our congregation. Now I'm sitting in the seat and I'm saying, I've got to figure out how to discipline myself in my present ministry to grow and stretch. And to me, I think that's the number one thing. If I'm not growing, then I can't help other people grow.
That's good.
So including my family. So I think that's number one.
Well, Barry, I'm just grateful that you're a part of the Heritage team, and I'm excited about the contacts you're making with churches. You love to preach. You love the training of those who preach God's word, and you love the
Yes, sir.
church, and that oozes out of everything you say and do, and churches feel that when you go to visit them. And I'm just personally, selfishly grateful I get to hang out with you on campus
Yes, sir.
when we're both in town at the same time,
Exactly.
which isn't always
Right,
a
right.
regular occurrence. But just thanks for what you're doing and have done for the kingdom. Thank you to all of you who are serving out there in various ministries for the honor and glory of God. And as we like to remind ourselves on a regular basis, ministry matters because our master matters.
Amen.
You have a blessed day.